Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm joined by David Hughes for what is quite an important week for Liverpool, mate.
Yeah, huge, mate. Made even better by the result in the Champions League. I think getting that third goal, the 2 goal cushion, kind of feels like Liverpool can go fully at it on Sunday, where maybe City feel like they have to balance both fixtures a little bit more. Obviously, they've got a tough one over in Madrid, haven't they? They've only got a slender 1 goal lead. So, I think it was a good start to the week for Liverpool, and now it's all about the big one at the Etihad.
I am assuming that you're looking forward to it from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, because you know what's really good about this fixture in this era, in the Klopp / Guardiola era, is it never fails to disappoint. I think traditionally, in the Premier League, you've had big fixtures that so often just don't really deliver. They can be a little bit, teams can be a bit shy. You can see the nerves out on the pitch, but this one just always seems to deliver, even if it's not a goal fest. It's been. I'm trying to think of. I think the game last season at the Etihad finished 1-1. Just a really intense game, even though it didn't have a ton of goals in it. So I'm expecting that even if this isn't a goal fest, I think it'll be a really interesting game, which settled by these smallest of margins, and it'll be a good one to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, this week's show, we had the option of going down a few different routes, really. Obviously, we just played Benfica. We didn't really get a chance to speak about that beforehand because of how the games worked out. Liverpool have won that game 3-1, fairly routine, I thought. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to start off talking about what everyone cares about most, and that is obviously Sunday's title decider in many people's eyes. So that's first on the agenda, and then I think, considering the amount of questions we got in for last week's Q&A, that's how we're going to do this second half of the show, really. We can't skip that many questions. Still have a fair few left. So if we didn't get to yours last week, hopefully we will this week. But it still feels like a long shot, to be honest. But first up, mate, anyway, Manchester City. Now, I mean, where to start? I mean, is this the decider for you, or is there more to it?
Well, in short, yes. Just because I was going to say, you look at the fixtures, specifically, we talk about the Premier League for a minute, and you think, Liverpool have got United at home, Everton at home, Newcastle away, Tottenham at home. I mean, that's a tough run of fixtures on paper. But the form Liverpool are in and the form City are in, it's very much like it was 2 years ago, where no matter who they're coming up against, they're just going to be too strong. You can't see. I mean, you look at United and Everton, and you think, from an emotional perspective, they're big games. But if you were to strip all that away and just look at it 11v11, should beat United, should definitely beat Everton. And it's the same for Newcastle. Newcastle had a little bit of a bounce, but should go there and win. Tottenham are doing well, but again, you fancy Liverpool. And I don't know if you've got City's fixtures in front of you now. If not, I'll bring them up. But I imagine it'd be a similar story for them. So for me, then given how tight it is and how dominant they are against other sides, this is it. This is more than likely going to have a huge say on who wins the Premier League this season.
I actually think it's the decider if City win. But I think if Liverpool win, I don't think it is. And if obviously there's a draw, I don't think it is. Because if people don't really realise, people haven't really talked about it, that if City win this, they go 4 points clear. That's big enough to win the league, really. With 8 games left. I mean, there'll be 7 games left after this. And you've just touched on the fact that City have, in our opinion, a slightly easier running.
Yeah, I'm just actually looking at it now, and it does, not to not to make any Liverpool fans fearful, but it does look a lot easier on paper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You got Wolves, Brighton, Watford, Leeds in the next 4. It looks a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Liverpool win the game, obviously they will go 2 points clear, which is still capable of swinging in one game. So I don't think it's over if Liverpool win the match. But I think if City win the game, don't think it's over, but it's not far off. One thing Liverpool do have in their favour is goal difference. So Liverpool are currently, 5 goals better off. So I suppose you could do the age-old comments and say that's worth a point in itself, maybe. So maybe if Liverpool will win the game, maybe you could say that the 3 points ahead of City rather than 2, considering the goal difference. But it's difficult. It's go on.
Yeah, I was going to say that the problem is, I think if you said the goal difference was positive 5 for Liverpool, didn't you?
Yeah.
I think that could be chipped away. If it was, say 15, for example, then that's your point, isn't it? But if points are dropped, the chances are that goal difference is going to swing as well. So I did think it was interesting, though, that Guardiola last week, I'm sure you would have seen the quote. I'll bring it up because, he said we had 2 or 3 chances to score and kill the game and get more for our goal difference against Liverpool. And I thought it's quite interesting and revealing there that he's clearly he's looking at the same, and he's a little bit fearful that it could play a decisive role come the end of the season.
Yeah, I've always wondered actually whether that plays a part. I remember Liverpool a few years back under Rodgers. We went to Palace away, the infamous Istanbul game, and I'm almost certain Liverpool were going for a daft goal difference there because we were 3-0 up. And still playing like we had a 2-goal deficit or something like that. So maybe it does play more of a part than we give it credit. But I would expect, considering that Liverpool already have a 5-goal advantage over City, I do think that by the end of the season Liverpool will have the better goal difference. Liverpool's defence, in particularly Alisson and Van Dijk, do look on form at the minute. Liverpool aren't conceding very many. When we conceded last night against Benfica, it just felt weird. It felt weird conceding the goal. Through a mistake, especially. And then in terms of the goals for column of the table, Liverpool are 7 goals better off than City at the moment. And half of that season has been spent, well, more than half really of that season has been spent without Luis Diaz, who's now available as an option for Liverpool up front. So
like a Jota-esque impact, hasn't he, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's been brilliant. He was great again last night. Speaking of Diaz, though, I mean, I'll use that as a segue. What's your team for this?
Good question.
Go from back to front.
Okay. Obviously, Alisson.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Right back picks itself, doesn't it? Left back picks itself as well. I would go with Robertson, even though I think Tsimikas has done well when he's come in.
Tsimikas.
Why change it now? You know what I mean?
Did you do that one on purpose then?
Yeah. Well, we're not going to change it now, are we? Van Dijk, and then I will say this second centre back is a little bit interesting. I'm still not 100% sure where to go on that one.
I think it's interesting that last night Matip was benched, and although Kanate played, I think he generally did do well. But if you look at the goal, it was a massive error. You know, the ball, he can't get his feet sorted out. The ball runs through his legs, and if that's it against City, it's going to get punished, isn't it? So, I think just for the sake of experience, the opponent, reliability, form throughout the season, I would slightly lean towards Matip, and I don't think as well. One area in which Kanate's been really valuable this season is 1v1. We played them at Old Trafford. I feel like that was specifically because United's left-sided threat with Rashford and players like that is always problematic for Liverpool. Kanate helps with that, but I feel like against City, there's almost less of a 1v1 threat maybe on that side. I mean, I suppose you could say if Sterling plays, maybe you definitely got that threat there, but I think in comparison to usual, I do think Matip is probably who I'd go with personally.
Yeah. Well, he's been great this season, and you've already touched on what I was about to say. I think it was pretty telling that Matip started on the bench in the Champions League game because it would have been extremely unlikely that whoever was going to play on Sunday played as well this week. It just wouldn't have made much sense. I know it happens with, say, Van Dijk, but that's a little bit different, isn't it? Because of who he is. I think one thing that could be interesting is, and maybe we'll talk on it a little bit more, but team selection and team formation and we will carry on with our team now, but I just want to flag it now on the subject of matter. Have you noticed there's been little variations, hasn't it, in this fixture in recent times? You know, we think of the Etihad fixture last season. Liverpool go to a 4-4-2.
Yeah, well, I was going to touch on that. I think that's massive. I actually think
Yeah.
I think that offers an insight into a potential possibility this time around.
Yeah, but we'll have a proper chat about it in a minute. But all I was going to say was, if you didn't, and both teams lined up in the 4-3-3 that they've played this season, you know, theoretically on paper, that's kind of cancel each other out, isn't it? You know, it's even matchups all over the pitch, and I then think that's where maybe Mata could become quite useful in his ability to step out and drive through the pitch, maybe pull players in, and then create a few more openings. So that could be one small thing that might tip it in his favour should Liverpool go 4-3-3 and City do the same. But as we'll touch on in a little bit, we don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, Liverpool obviously will be pressed as well in this game, and not very few opponents actually up to press Liverpool in their own defensive third. But I think in this game, Liverpool can expect to be pressed, and I think in this game, any player who's not kind of totally comfortable on the ball is going to stick out like a sore thumb. And I think one thing Matip has certainly got attached to his game is that composure and that ability to play football from the centre of defence. Not that Kanate can't. I think Kanate's been actually a lot better than I thought he was going to be when it comes to that this season. But Matip just has that element of coolness and, as I said, that bit more experience of playing in this fixture.
Yeah, I agree. Number 6 picks itself, yeah?
Yeah.
Fabinho. Midfield, I would go, but I'll throw it over to you. I would go Thiago and Henderson.
Yeah, I would as well.
Yeah.
Although I do think Keita played brilliant last night. I thought he was one of his better games, and I thought he was great. But I think in this game, Thiago is an absolute given for me. Absolutely plays. I'm desperate to see him play in this game, to be honest. You should have seen me when when he got injured in the warm up in the final. I was under the couch, mate. I was finished. But I just want to see him play in this big game, because I think the past few big games Liverpool have had, Chelsea away, Chelsea at Wembley in the final. I'm not sure if Thiago was available for City in the first game of the season at Anfield, but it feels like he weren't. Don't think he was. But I want him to play, basically. I think his Liverpool's record when he's on the pitch is brilliant, and in this game in particular, it's going to come down to that individual ability of certain players, and Thiago just has that ability to just make such valuable passes. And considering City might be open in certain moments, if Thiago can feed Liverpool's front three, that could be very decisive, that on the break. And I think Henderson speaks for himself. I think he's got plenty of experience in this game. Very reliable on the defensive side of the game, which is important, especially against City. And he obviously got a rest as well against Benfica.
Yeah, he did. Which, again, if you read in between the lines, that probably hints, doesn't it, what's happening? The attack, Josh.
I was going to say, I think the big one is the attack.
Yeah, this is a headache.
Yeah.
Salah's obvious. Okay, so we'll put Salah in. Then I'm a little bit.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
I actually don't have an answer to this, for what it's worth. I haven't actually come up with a predetermined answer for this, so we're going to answer this live on the show.
What I would say is maybe I could be tempted to go with the traditional front three, make a case for that with Firmino and Mane, knowing what you've got on the bench in terms of Jota, who has a great record of scoring important goals, and Diaz, who looks, on fire and could be a really good impact substitution. I would maybe lean towards that, but I could make a case for the other way as well.
Yeah, one thing I think I would do, I think I would bench Diaz. A lot of people might be a bit surprised about that. But I think in this game in particular, I know Diaz has looked like he's played for Liverpool for about 4 years of late, and he's slotted into the system perfectly and everything like that. But the bottom line is, though, at the same time, he has not been at Liverpool for 4 years. He's been at Liverpool for 3 months. So although he's looking like a natural, he is still learning the details of the system. He doesn't yet speak the language. So when it comes to communicating with Klopp, that kind of maybe isn't fully there yet. And I think specifically against this opponent, you have to be so good defensively. Not just in terms of your work rate and stuff, but in terms of your positioning and your awareness of the system, where to be in certain moments. And I think considering that City and Liverpool will probably attempt to press them high in certain moments, I think it would be a risk to play Diaz purely because of the defensive side of the game. Whereas I think Mane, for example, has obviously played within the confines of this system for about 5 years or so. Played against City on a number of occasions, knows exactly what you have to do and what you have to prevent them from doing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So although I think Diaz is a bigger threat at the moment in attack, I think from the off, I would use him from the bench as an impact. And I think he'd have a great impact as well when he comes on. But from the off, I think I would leave him on the bench just for those reasons. Do you reckon that's what you think?
Yeah. Again, I can't really add much more to it because I agree. I think the impact point is key. I think he's a really, really good option to have coming off the bench. And yeah, that's why I said I go with the traditional front three. A bit of a tongue twister there. I just feel like they know the system a lot better. I think Firmino could be key in this game. He's shown a few times this season when he's come back in what he can offer, and maybe what Liverpool have missed at times. Even though Jota's been really good with his goals, I actually think Diaz could be more of a goal threat than Mane on current form. But I just think everything else that goes with it in this fixture of all fixtures means that I'd be more inclined to go with that three, knowing that you could change it if you were looking to chase a goal, or if you're just looking to add a little bit more threat later in the match.
Yeah, I think the big one for me is whether you play Jota or not. I think I am on your side when it comes to the traditional front three. My only question is just whether I would maybe use Jota to disrupt that a little bit. And the only reasons of why I would potentially do that is I think he's more of a threat on the break than Firmino is, simply because of his speed, really. And I think he's a bit more clinical than Firmino. He's a bit more of a poacher than Firmino and Mane. I think he is inclined to nick a goal even when he's playing badly. And if you looked, I haven't looked for a while now, but his defensive numbers when I last checked, I think he generally presses more than Mane, and I think he generally wins the ball, regains high up the field more than Mane. So I think there is a case for Jota. I think in this, although there's the usual front three having bags of experience in this game, I think Jota is obviously a bit more of a threat than Bobby, and in terms of scoring, and I think he maybe offers a fair bit on the defensive side in comparison to Mane, certainly based on the numbers. But I do think Mane is still a very good defensive player, so maybe I can flip a coin with that. But that's where I'm struggling.
So you're just thinking Jota either through the middle or on the left?
Yeah, well, I would obviously go Salah on the right, and then I don't know what I would do next. I don't know if I'd go. Obviously, if Firmino plays, Jota would have to play on the left, which is what Liverpool did against Manchester United at Old Trafford. Left Mane on the bench, but if Mane plays, in my opinion, Mane plays on the left and Jota plays through the middle. So I suppose some of it will depend on what you want the Manchester City centre backs to have to deal with. Do you want them to have to deal with Jota, who's maybe going to threaten him behind a little bit, or do you want them to deal with Firmino, who's going to drag them out of position? What you go with there? It's a difficult one.
I think I'd be inclined more to go with Firmino there. I think I think it just makes life a little bit more difficult for the central defenders in knowing how far they drop in, and also you're dealing with basically a lone kind of pivot, aren't you? With Rodri, he's expected to do all that work, and I just think it makes his job a little bit harder. But then look, you make a case for the other way. You could say, well, City play a high line, hit them on the transition, and you've got that threat in behind with Jota, haven't you? So I guess you could make a case for both, and it's kind of, they say it's a nice headache to have, but it's still a headache at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, in Jota's case, I said recently on this podcast, he's top of the Premier League for goals per 90 and expected goals per 90. And he's a natural when it comes to counter-attacking. And Liverpool are naturally going to have to be in transition a bit more against this team. So I do think he's a natural fit, but at the same time, Bobby is performed very, very well against City over the years, and he's Liverpool's most defensively active forward by a mile. It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what he does. But I suppose this then leads us on to whether you potentially find a way of playing for them by switching things up. 4-2-3-1 potentially is a system Liverpool have used on occasion this season, but usually when we are chasing a goal or we're against weak opponents. And obviously last season, Klopp surprised us all by using 4-4-2.
Yeah, that was a very big surprise, and I think it worked really well because for certainly the first 20 minutes, Liverpool were hugely on top. They scored as well in that time, if I remember correctly, and we talked about it afterwards, saying it was really good because I don't think Guardiola would have expected it. I think there was a period of adjustment required for the City players as they tried to work out what was going on, who should be picking up who. And within that time, Liverpool ideally would have liked to got a couple more goals. And I think the game's done, isn't it? If Liverpool go 2-0 up. They got a goal, but they were pegged back, and then the game it felt like City kind of grew into the game once they adjusted a little bit. But it does make you think, will they adjust it again? Because I think, given how well these teams know each other, it could be a successful tactic. Even if you think this season, Guardiola done that in the second half. He adjusted things, didn't he, at Anfield? I think it was both sides went up with that 4-3-3. I think he was probably content to do that because going to Anfield, it probably would prefer to teams to stylistically maybe cancel each other out a little bit, keep the game tight, and then maybe nick something. But I think he needed to get a goal. Maybe they'd gone 2-1 behind, and he then switched to that 4-2-3-1 that he used for much of this season. Last season, sorry. They played a lot of 4-2-3-1 last season. Obviously, they've gone back to 4-3-3 this season. But switched to 4-2-3-1. They got an equaliser, and they had a good spell in the game. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't expect Guardiola and City to change their formation with them being the home side. But I wouldn't be shocked if Liverpool tried something new.
See, this is why I think it's interesting though, because over time Guardiola kept playing Liverpool. He wasn't getting too much success, and he stumbled across 4-2-3-1, and he started then getting a bit of joy, particularly when it comes to building out and through Liverpool's press. And I think he used 4-2-3-1 something like 3 matches in a row against Liverpool, and that was then when Klopp used 4-4-2. And I think the reason he used 4-4-2 was because Guardiola's 4-2-3-1 was starting to deliver a little bit against them. And for those who can't remember, Liverpool used a front two of Salah and Firmino, and Salah and Firmino basically attached themselves to Rodri and Gundogan in the middle of the park. And Liverpool's 2 wide players were Jota and Mane, and they essentially tucked inside defensively to block access to the half spaces for City. I really liked that. I thought it was very, very clever. But it was done because of the 4-2-3-1 that Guardiola was using, I thought. And obviously you've just touched on this season, according to Y Scout, City have used 4-3-3 79% of the time this season in the Premier League and Champions League. 4-2-3-1 has been used about 8% of the time. So, considering that, it's going to be interesting to see if Guardiola does stick with what he's been using for most of the season, which is 4-3-3, or if he's going to use 4-2-3-1, which seems to be his go-to shape, specifically when he's facing Liverpool. I'll just have a check now what he used earlier in the season against Liverpool in terms of formation. I'm not sure if you can remember, mate.
Yeah, it was a 4-3-3 initially, and then I think he reverted to the 4-2-3-1
You've just said that then,
in the
didn't you?
second half. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, well, that's going to be interesting. Then, obviously, if Klopp does go with a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1 or whatever, it does open up the possibility of fielding 4 of his forwards. But then, if he did do that, one of Henderson, Fabinho, or Thiago is going to be on the bench, and I can't see it. I really can't see it.
No. I can't see that either. I'm trying to think there's any way you can get around it, but unless
I think considering he's got his best 11, his full squad available, I think he will just play 4-3-3 and play his best team. I think that's what he's going to do. But obviously, there's the possibility in the second half, maybe of switching things up to a 4-4-2 or whatever if Guardiola does the same changes he did early in the season at Anfield when he moved to 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, what I expect is if that happens, both go 4-3-3. I expect the first goal to be crucial in terms of the outcome of the match. And I then expect whoever goes behind to make a reactive change very quickly. So what I'm thinking is, City will be looking at for a point of view thinking, if we score first, we have a good chance to kind of to hold on to this now. Same thing with Liverpool. I expect the other team who fall behind to be like, we need to do a reactive change quickly. We need to change so it's not even 1v1s all over the pitch theoretically, and need to do something where we can try and create some sort of overload. So then that's where I think you could maybe see the team who go behind then go into like a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, well, the scoring first thing is interesting in this one, actually, because if you look at City's record this season, I think City's approach has been totally all about patience and control. I think they've scored a lot of goals in the second half, and it's just been about restricting the opposition to virtually nothing and being very patient and eventually getting the breakthrough. But when other teams have scored first, City's record in the Premier League this season, when conceding first, 1 win, 2 draws, 3 losses. So it's not the best record when it comes to conceding first. And if you consider that they would concede first against Liverpool, you wouldn't expect them to pick up a win based on those figures, because some of those games are against like Spurs and teams like that who aren't as good as Liverpool. So it's going to be an interesting one.
What's Liverpool's record like? It's taking the lead. I bet it's pretty solid.
Well,
yeah, they've won 20, drew 3, lost none.
Well, one thing I was going to flag the other day, I was going to tweet it. If you look at this season, time spent leading and time spent level and time spent trailing, Liverpool have spent the most time in the lead than of any other team. And on average, if we do a per match, Liverpool tend to lead for 53% of the time. City 50% of the time. And when it comes to trailing, especially, Liverpool have only been trailing for 6.3% of the season. City have trailed for 10.3% of the season. But it's interesting that despite that, City have a 1-point lead at the top of the table. So it's interesting how it all comes down to just accumulating points at the end of the day.
Just one more thing to add before we do move on. I just had a quick look, and City's record when they do take the lead is scored first on 22 occasions and won every single game when they have.
Yeah.
So big first goal is going to be key, mate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it always is, isn't it? But I think in this match in particular, it's going to it's going to really change the game state, isn't it? It's going to really change the tactical approach of both teams. Liverpool will probably go to a forward attack. City will probably start to show pressure, which is unlike them. Liverpool will start to dominate possession against the Guardiola team. So, I mean, we've probably missed loads, but we've previewed a fair bit. We've took half an hour of the show on that. And we've got questions to get through. So I think we will leave it there. I'm not sure I'm going to test the water with predictions. What do you think?
I actually think it'll be a draw, you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. The thing is, it's a weird game where either team could easily win as well. It's, you know, there's just nothing between them really in terms of quality. Well, a point, which is probably fair. So, yeah. Maybe a draw. What? Just before we do move on, how would you feel about a draw? Would you be like, okay, or would you think, that's a big opportunity gone?
I feel like a lot of that would depend on how the match goes. But I do feel like if you're the chasing team and you get the opportunity to face the one team that's ahead of you, you kind of have to beat them really, because you can't then expect or ask other teams to pick up points off that team if you can't yourself, if you know what I mean. So for me, I think if you look back at 2018-19, I think it was, when Liverpool lost the league by a point, I don't think we beat City home or away. In fact, I think we might have lost at the Etihad and drew at home, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that was the game Mahrez missed that pen at Anfield, so City could have won that one as well. So, and that cost us the league. So, in my opinion, Liverpool should be going for a win here. But I think the big one from a Liverpool perspective, as boring as it is, Liverpool just can't lose this. Because if Liverpool lose this, you go 4 points behind City with 7 games to go, and you have a tougher run. So, as long as Liverpool don't lose, I suppose it's not the end of the world, but you have to win, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, I agree.
So we'll leave that one there anyway. Hopefully, we'll speak about that one next week in terms of Liverpool going for the title. You know, it's going to be an interesting one to watch. But for the next part of the show, until the end, we are going to address the questions that we didn't get to last week. So, Dave, I'll let you continue where you left off. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, okay, mate. So I'll do my best with these, because as you can imagine, we've had less time to prepare getting through them. But the first one is off Tom Stewart, friend of the show. He says, "All right, fellas, if Klopp leaves when he says he is, what do you predict our starting 11 will look like at that stage?" I mean, we're looking at the end of 2024, if I'm right, aren't we? That's when his contract's due to expire. So we're 2 years away from that. Obviously, it's really difficult to answer that thoroughly because there's transfer windows between now and then. But maybe some key pillars. If we run through the team, Josh, and just feel free to jump in any time on this. Alisson will be 31, I imagine, based on what he's doing now. He's still in the starting 11. Would you agree?
Say that again. Sorry.
Alisson would still be in the starting 11. You think in 20? He'd be 31 at that stage.
Yeah, comfortably for me.
Yeah, fine. Right back, you know, unbelievably, Trent would only be 25, so yeah, he'll still be there. Kanate, you imagine, will still be in the team. Maybe alongside him, there might be someone else. Because obviously,
not for me.
Not for you. So you still Van Dijk in?
I still think Virgil will be there. Yeah. I said last week. I think his longevity is going to get underrated. I think he's going to still be playing at a high level like Thiago Silva when he's like 35.
I suppose the way his game is, you know, he'd only be 32 at the time. Okay,
he's a late bloomer as well. Okay. Late bloomer.
Yeah. Okay. We'll leave him in. Left back. I don't know. Listen, Robertson would be 30. I'm going to put a grey area over that one. I'm not too sure where I stand on that one. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on it, Josh.
It'd be interesting to see when his contract expires, but I have a feeling he'd still be there. I think Robertson.
Maybe.
It's actually putting into perspective how little things would change, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But then I'd say midfield gets a bit different, doesn't it? For being over 28, he'd be 30. Maybe he's still around. I don't expect Henderson to still be in the team. I'd be surprised. I'd still expect him to maybe be around. I don't know, but Again, I need to know what the contracts are. Thiago, I think Thiago will be done by then. I know you love him, Josh, so I don't want to break your heart, but I think in 2 years' time, I think he'll be done by then. So midfield, I think there'll be a few new faces, which we'd expect anyway, wouldn't we? And then forwards is a good one, isn't it? Because you've got Diaz, Jota, both 25 now. They'd be 27, still heavily involved. Harvey Elliott, you pull him in midfield or attack, really. So he's a good one to have. He'd just be 21. You know, what a kind of prospect that is. But then Mane, you think Mane probably won't be, you know, his contract would expire by then for me. You know, he'll probably be gone as well. And we expect Salah to be gone. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a few key pillars still in the side, but there's also going to be a fair bit of change, I'd say, over the next 2 years.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think it's going to be interesting, but I do think a lot of the players who are going to be there then, we are seeing them now. I don't think it'll be that different. I think that's the beauty of proper squad plan. When you get it right, you can have these pillars in place for a while. Look at Real Madrid, for example. Let's look at a lot of the players there who won the Champions League 3 times in a row for them. So I've got a question from Greg Hughes. He says, a mate of mine, a huge Reds fan, is studying a master's degree in maths and will take this year's mathematical modelling of football course. She's smart. Once she graduates, how could she get a job in football analysis, preferably for Liverpool? Interesting question. I think, for me, from what I understand, the bottom line is it's a difficult industry to get into. One of the ways in which you can do it is by producing public content, basically. That's what me and Dave did, and that's what a lot of people we know did who now work for football clubs. They produce public work, get themselves out there, demonstrate that they can do certain things, and on the back of that, they get hired. But I think if there's one thing I've picked up on, it's that qualifications are only, I mean, I'm not even sure up to 50% of the battle. Qualification, I suppose, is nice to have behind you. But when it comes to getting into an industry, I think a lot of the time you have to kind of demonstrate that you can do it almost for free. As I said, put your work out there publicly and hope you get noticed. That's what happened to me. I was lucky enough for that to be the case. And I don't work for a club. I only work for Reach PLC. So, yeah, but good luck. All the best with that.
Yeah, good luck. Real McKenzie. I would have said Raul, but I mean, they put a nice little spell next to it, which I appreciate it. Must know that. Must know my Temiskas heartache. Some guys do me a favour. This current Liverpool team is arguably the greatest team we've ever produced. Fair comment. How much longer do you realistically think we can remain as one of the best teams in the world? And do you think a lot of it hinges on Klopp being at the helm? I think Liverpool have done a lot of really good work beyond pitch level. You know, you'll have to look at the recruitment. I think the club's really well aligned. I think in the business of money, if you compare them to other teams in the division, you know, they've been really well run. I know there's criticism of FSG spending. I get it. I see the frustration. But if you look at how sustainable the club are, you know, they are one of the very best at that. And on that basis, I think that can help keep Liverpool competitive to a degree. But, you know, I think it's always really hard when you lose a manager like who's had the impact that Klopp has had at Liverpool. You know, he's had a transformational impact on the club, really, if you think of what they were when he come into what they are now and what they've been over these past few years. The honest answer is, I think the structure will be good enough for a new manager to come in and try and continue his work, but I don't think you know if they're going to be able to do so until it actually happens, because it's such a big job and it's going to be a daunting task for someone in a few years' time, for sure.
Yeah, so James P has been in touch. He asks, we've been talking about data analytics being used in professional football for a while. Are you aware of any international teams that are heavily implementing the approach? I suppose it depends what you mean by heavily implementing, because I think a lot of international teams will naturally use data in their analysis and, player recruitment when it comes to the national pools and things like that. But when it comes to having a specific impact on playing style and tactical details like it is at Liverpool, I'd probably be a little bit surprised if that was the case at an international level. I do think international teams kind of recruit on an international level players using the numbers though. Like I think Roberto Martinez for Belgium. I think I've seen clips of him analysing Belgian players based on stats and things like that. And if he wants like a player who's a dribbler type thing, he'll use numbers to tell him which Belgian players are of that nature, essentially. So I do think it's getting used across football without a doubt. But in terms of analytics shaping an international team properly, like it has shaped Liverpool, I doubt it, to be honest. Not to Liverpool's level at least, but I do think it's going on.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've seen any similar examples myself, but I don't think I have. I don't think I've ever read anything particular. But I suppose it's different. There obviously will be analysis in place, on a kind of team level, but that deeper side, I don't know if it's more club specific. Maybe if someone's read anything interesting, they can flag it to us. This will be a short answer. Paddy F. Can you think of any reasoning or justification or argument why Liverpool signed Balotelli in 2014 and Benteke in 2015 from an analytical point of view? These players seem to embody the opposite of what Rodgers wanted from his team. And given these signings occurred only 3 or 4 years before players perfectly attuned to Klopp's vision like Mane and Salah were signed, what does this say about how Liverpool's transfer policy evolved so quickly? I guess that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about what makes Liverpool so good beyond what's happening on the pitch. They have kind of evolved to this market-leading side in this area. To answer your questions about, Balotelli, I have no idea. I'd love to come with a witty answer or a good answer as to why those players were signed, but I think the reality was the Liverpool were a different proposition then. These players look like they maybe had talent, and maybe this is a common mistake. Maybe Liverpool thought, they'd be the right environment to get the very best out of these talents. They could work with the personalities. Obviously Rodgers was known as a good man manager, so maybe all this played a part in that. They felt like they could unlock the very best of these players that others hadn't been able to do so. But yeah, the reality was it was bad moves, and it's not the type of moves you'd see Liverpool do today.
Hopefully not. So I've got kind of like a combined question here because two people have asked similar. So from Rum Garche and from hang on a sec. Will Miller as well. I think it's Will Miller. Yeah, he said it's basically talking about Salah and whether Liverpool will actually sign a like-for-like replacement for him. They both kind of touch on the fact that Liverpool could potentially replace Salah with a midfielder instead and maybe shift the system or whatever, change the formation and things like that. But I can see the points, but I personally don't think it will happen. I think for years we've been toying with the prospect of Klopp finally shifting towards a 4-2-3-1 or whatever on a permanent basis. But the more I think about it, the more I think that it's just not going to happen. And one of the reasons I don't think it's going to happen is because I think it massively helps when it comes to recruitment if the recruiters know exactly what kind of player they're looking for and the details of the system and what the player has to offer in that system. I think when we went to the StatsBomb conference, Dave, and Ian Graham gave that talk, I think one of the points that he used to capture one of the reasons maybe why a transfer will fail, I think he listed something like 6. One of them, I think, was basically a player being used out of position or a player being a player that was system changing or whatever. Whereas I think when Liverpool, one of the reasons Liverpool have kept 4-3-3 consistently for years and years is to help with recruitment. I think you know what you're buying. And I think if you look at some of the top recruiters out there, that's generally the case. City have kept 4-3-3 for a few years and generally have recruited well. Brighton have recruited well. They have played with a back three for a few years now. Antonio Conte tends to recruit fairly well. He has used a 3-4-3, 3-5-2 system variations of the two over the years consistently. So usually, and if you look at a manager who maybe doesn't recruit particularly well, Brendan Rodgers changes his system every week because he likes to be a tactical, innovator, tactical genius and stuff like that. But it doesn't help when it comes to recruitment. So I think Liverpool will stick with 4-3-3, and I think we'll replace Salah with the next in line, who is a wide forward who is inclined to score and assist, and who is left-footed.
Yeah, but there's quite a few questions that come in on Salah that we addressed last week, and still got a few more here. Please don't be offended if yours hasn't been read out, but there's just a lot of the same stuff about him, and I just don't want to maybe overdo for other listeners who are maybe a bit fatigued on the subject. So apologies on my part if I choose to just skip over the Salah one, but it is hopefully for the good of the episode. Gordon Johnston asked, I wonder if players really do feel pressure in between games, and how do they individually cope with pressure, or the sports psychologists at Anfield? I mean, I think that's definitely a yes. I guess to an extent you get more accustomed to playing in such fixtures. But 100% they'll still feel pressure. It's important to remember that as recently as this summer, Liverpool were working with Neuro 11, who I think they label themselves as data-based training for elite athletes. I've actually spoken to Dr. Nicholas Horsler, who reached out to me on Twitter. I think he follows you as well, Josh, who's heavily involved with stuff at Liverpool. He seemed really receptive. Maybe it might be good in the future at the end of the season. We might ask him if he'd be willing to come on the show and he could talk a little bit more about working with Liverpool, because I think that would be quite good. But to answer your question, yeah, I think they definitely feel pressure. And that's why you have these people coming in who can kind of help to cope with that and, try and use it to your advantage as well when possible.
So John Yeomans has been in touch, another regular listener as far as I'm aware. He says, interesting question actually, he says, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, Dave. Is it possible for a club or a player to game their statistics so that over a period of time a player's metrics look good and increase their value, basically? For example, a player is always the one making forward passes, or a player takes the free kicks, or playing in a certain position against weaker opposition. I think it's an interesting shout. I do think generally across the board, one of the ways in which you can do this is simply by giving a player penalties. I think obviously Arsenal paid a lot for Nicolas Pepe a few seasons ago, but a lot of people kind of ignored that. Okay, he scored a fair amount of goals from a wide position, but I think something like 9 of his goals were penalties. And that just looks great, doesn't it? If you're looking for players according to the numbers and you're doing it in a bit of an amateur way, and you see a player scored 20 goals from a wide position, but then you don't realise that 9 of them are from the penalty spot. Maybe that's a way of increasing the player's value and making him look a bit better. I don't think the forward passing option is a thing. Making a player just make more forward passes or whatever, I'm not sure that's a thing, but taking set pieces for me probably is. Bruno Fernandes is a player who really shined in the numbers based on his numbers in Portugal. But in Portugal, he took all the corners, he took all the free kicks, took all the penalties. And generally, if you look at specifically numbers in terms of key passes and creating chances, a lot of the players who are high on the list are that high because they create headers from corners and they get a massive boost. I remember a few seasons ago, Liverpool, when they were amateurs at this sort of thing, bought Charlie Adam, Stuart Downing, and Jordan Henderson in the same window. And a lot of the reason behind the 3 of those pages was because they ranked high in chances created they all took set pieces for the respective teams. And it'd be interesting to see if at the time Liverpool filtered that in.
Yeah, I think there's you can certainly boost passing numbers as well with excessive short passes rather than those of a more progressive nature. So you can have a really high pass success rate, but for the kind of short 5-yarders, they don't really add much value to your possession. Then you'll see that there's not much in that. Just on that thing as well, I car school to the team I'm with. I car school with a player who's played the football league. Got like 50 odd international caps. Won't name him, but he has told me, Josh, that he's been at a club and the manager has been heavily reliant on unnamed manager has been heavily reliant on GPS stats, and his opinion has been that if you run more than the opposition, you will win every time. Which
Okay.
we obviously know is ridiculous.
I've heard that one before, yeah.
Yeah, we know it's ridiculous, but he said so. There was players in the team who'd do a lot of excessive running, basically to boost their numbers, even though there was no correlation with actually good performances and winning matches. So I do wonder, maybe not the exact same, but I do wonder if that happens somewhere along the football pyramid where there's certain kind of boosting of underlying numbers for the cause beyond wanting to win football matches. There probably is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the ways in which Liverpool can obviously generate a lot of interest in their players simply by playing Nico Williams, for example, in the Trent role. You do naturally get a lot of opportunities to be an attacking fullback, and you look at it as an attacking fullback. Same as Divock Origi as well, scoring plenty of goals for Liverpool and things like that. So I do think there's ways to do it, but whether it's a popular thing, I'm not sure really.
Craig Johnson, do you think Jota has what it takes to lead Portugal on the international stage in the same success that Ronaldo did? It'd be impressive if he could, but what people forget is, yeah. Look, what people forget is, I know he looks a little bit washed up at maybe now, but Ronaldo's a generational talent. He's been one of the best players ever. I'm not taking anything away from Jota, but I just think I think he can be an excellent player for Portugal, but I don't think he can have the same impact as Ronaldo, because I think I can't think of one Portuguese player who will.
Ronaldo essentially put Portugal on his back, didn't he?
Exactly,
them, essentially.
So not for me, but he can still be a fantastic player for them.
Yeah, so I've got a question from Mark Weeks, another regular contributor, I think. He says, with an increasing number of top players running their contracts down, are we seeing the end of transfer fees? Or is this a cyclical phenomenon? Yeah, it's another good question. It is interesting to see how it's happening, but I think a lot of it, to be honest, is associated with the top clubs in particular not having very much money to use over the past few years. The likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus in particular have made a series of bad moves in the transfer market and financially, and it's resulted in them being a bit skint, essentially. So on the back of that, the only way in which they've been able to sign these players is by kind of convincing them to run the contract down and getting paid big in the when they eventually arrive. There's no way Real Madrid would be able to sign Kylian Mbappe, who in previous years, from a club, by the way, that's essentially owned by a country. In previous years, those are the players that Real Madrid would always poach, and they'd always have the money to do it. But in the modern day, Real Madrid are no longer the rich club, the club with all the money, and the only way to get them on board is by getting them on a free. So I think a lot of it stems from that. Whether those clubs will come again and eventually be able to afford these players again remains to be seen. I'm not really sure, but I wouldn't be that surprised, to be honest, if player power continues to keep growing and players running down contracts and leaving for free and getting a big signing on fee is, I think it's here to stay, to be honest.
Yeah, I probably agree actually. Tony Mangan, firstly says thank you for the wonderful podcasts. Big fan of Blood Red and our show in particular, which is nice. One, seem to remember hearing Simicast. What do I call him again? Oh yeah, I'm just gonna have to go back to Norway. Simicast was signed. Seem to remember that when he was signed, he played at right back. Why has he never played there whilst Trent's been injured? And please explain in detail why he's not being considered there either. Tony, please excuse me, but I'm not going to go into too much detail. But I appreciate your nice message. So the truth is, I'm not 100% sure. The dynamics of playing the left compared to the right might seem basic, but reality is it's not that simple. I think it becomes quite complex. If he's played there before, then maybe he is more accustomed to it. But obviously, we're talking about doing it in a much tougher environment. The Premier League or Champions League, and not just that. You've got to remember how difficult that job is at Liverpool. Think of all the times we spoke about Trent being called out for his defensive or inability to defend, I should say. We that's often inflated a little bit, but the issues he has is he's always defending in transition. That's really tough. So you're asking him to go into a new position and do the same. Really, I think that's hard. So maybe that's why that's been considered by Klopp in the past, which is why he's put say like a midfielder in there. I think Milner's gone in there a couple of times, hasn't he, Josh?
Yeah.
So maybe he does that. So I think these are all things that he weighs up and maybe just considers that it's not worth the gamble. But I'm not saying it'll never happen. It could happen in the future, especially if Klopp has a bit more trust in him to play there.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have to round up there, mate. As usual, we didn't get through everybody, which is unfortunate. So apologies to people such as Robert Coulson, Stuart Dunn, Chris Wright, Richard Howard, Zifu the King, Victoria Young. Even got a question from Thor of Asgard. So whether that's an actual person putting in a question, I don't know. But very interesting name, nevertheless. Apologies to all of those people, and more. There's plenty more.
Yeah. There's two more there as well on my Tahir Iqbal and Ahmed Gokal. I think it is. Apologies to you as well.
Yeah, SC that as well is another one, but I think there's more. I think there's more we haven't got to. So apologies to everyone who hasn't had the question answered, but we did our best. Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you, mate. Hope you enjoy the game Sunday.
Yeah, we hope our listeners do, and hopefully Liverpool pick up a win, and we will speak about whatever happens next week. So do tune in then. Thanks for tuning in this week, and we'll see you next time.